Welcome to SLUMBERVERSE! Oh gee, another dimension of naps!
Hey there, sleepyheads, glad to have you back. Before we slip into tonight's tale, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. The storm pressed its fingers against the windows on the night Luna decided to join the world, as if the sky itself was feeling for the right moment to let her through. Above the bakery where the scent of tomorrow's bread already whispered through warm brick walls, Elena breathed through waves of labor while rain drummed its ancient rhythm against glass. Sage, 7 years old and wise in the way children become when they grow up surrounded by the certainty of rising dough, sat wrapped in his grandmother's quilt, listening to sounds he didn't yet have words for, the soft urgency in his father's voice, his mother's breathing that rose and fell like tides, and something else. Something that made him press his ear to the floorboards, as if the house itself was trying to tell him a secret. When Luna's first cry split the air, thin and sure as a silver thread, the storm seemed to pause and listen. In that moment of held breath between thunder and silence, someone knocked at the bakery's back door, with the kind of gentle persistence that suggested they had been waiting a very long time. Sage crept down the narrow stairs, his bare feet finding the familiar creaks that had learned to sing softly under his weight. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could see 2 figures on the doorstep, their faces hidden beneath hoods that seemed to catch and hold shadows like cups holding starlight. They carried between them something rectangular and heavy, wrapped in fabric that shimmered with the deep blue-black of water at midnight. "For the baby," one of them said, and their voice carried the soft accent of everywhere and nowhere, the kind of speech that belonged to travelers who had seen too many sunrises to count. "She'll understand when she's ready." Before Sage could ask what they meant, before he could call for his father who was upstairs helping Luna find her way into breathing, the strangers had set their burden, down and disappeared into the storm like thoughts, returning to the mind that dreamed them. The television that waited beneath the shimmering cloth was unlike anything Sage had ever seen. Its screen held the quality of still water, dark and deep, and when he touched the wooden frame, warmth pulsed beneath his fingertips like a sleeping heartbeat. The dial was smooth as riverstone, and as he turned it experimentally, the screen flickered to life with a light that didn't quite behave like light should, softer, more patient, as if it were remembering how to glow rather than simply turning on. Upstairs, Luna's cry rose again, stronger this time, and the television screen shimmered in response, as if her voice was tuning it to some frequency that existed beyond sound. Sage felt a gentle pull, not frightening but curious, like the feeling of almost remembering a dream. For just a moment he saw something that made his breath catch, a room that looked almost like their kitchen, but where snow fell softly against windows instead of rain, and a child who looked almost like him stood watching the white flakes dance. "Sage," his father's voice called down the stairs, breathless with joy and exhaustion. "Come meet your sister." The screen immediately returned to its water-like stillness, showing only his own wide-eyed reflection, but the warmth remained in the wooden frame, and as he climbed the stairs, he could hear the softest hum coming from the strange television, like a lullaby being sung in a language he almost understood. Elena held Luna against her chest, both of them glowing in the lamplight that made their small apartment feel like the center of the universe. The baby's eyes were wide and dark, already seeming to focus on something beyond what the rest of them could see. When Sage told them about the television and the strangers who brought it, his parents exchanged a look that held more questions than answers. But no worry, only the kind of wonder that comes when mystery arrives wearing the clothes of a gift. His father carried the television upstairs and placed it in the corner of what would become Luna's room, though none of them could explain why that felt like exactly where it belonged. As the storm finally quieted to a gentle whisper outside, Luna's breathing settled into the peaceful rhythm of deep sleep. And in the corner, the television hummed its gentle lullaby, its screen reflecting not the room around them, but something softer, something that looked like all the love in the world finding its way home, through frequencies that existed between heartbeats. Sage sat beside his sister's crib, watching the way the strange, patient light played across her sleeping face. And somehow he knew that Luna would grow up understanding languages the rest of them were only beginning to hear. The dial caught the first pale light of dawn like a promise, and somewhere in the quiet space between channels, infinite possibilities whispered their welcome, to the newest member of a family that was about to discover just how many different ways there were to say hello. Morning settled into the bakery like a second blanket, warm and steady, and by the time Luna could walk on her own, the scent of proofing dough had woven itself into her understanding of what home meant. The television lived in the corner of her small room, with the patience of an old friend, quiet most days, humming softly at dusk, when the last customers carried away their daily bread and the family gathered for dinner. Elena would prop Luna's door open, while she folded butter into pastry downstairs, and the sounds of trays sliding, timers chiming, and Sage's laughter with the morning regulars floated up the narrow staircase like a gentle lullaby made of ordinary happiness. When Luna woke from afternoon naps, she would blink at the soft dark screen, and it would seem to blink back, as if it had been waiting patiently for her to remember something important. The first time she laughed at what her parents called static, she wasn't even 2 years old. Elena had settled her in a nest of quilted pillows while she ran between the kitchen and the front counter, and the screen flickered with what looked like gentle snow to everyone else. But Luna clapped her small hands at something nobody else could see, a quick glimpse of their own kitchen, but with windows shaped like crescents, and someone who looked like Elena, her hair pinned with wooden sticks, dusting sugar across bread that rose in delicate spirals, as if the dough had learned a different way to reach toward the sky. The image slipped away so quickly that Elena simply kissed Luna's forehead and murmured, "Just snow on the screen, little one." But Luna kept reaching toward the dial as if it were a magical instrument that hummed with possibilities. By the time she could speak in full sentences, Luna had developed her own private vocabulary for what the television offered. The static was never empty to her. It made patterns that seemed to match the rhythm of her heartbeat, showing her fragments of lives that felt familiar, yet wondrously different. Sage, now growing tall and steady, like the bread he helped shape each morning, began to notice the subtle changes in Luna's expression when she sat with the television. He couldn't see what captured her attention so completely, but he learned to read the soft wonder that crossed her face, the way her breathing would slow as if she were listening to music only she could hear. When she told him about the place where he lived in a lighthouse by the sea, his hands rough from ropes instead of flour, tending a beacon that called ships safely home, Sage felt something shift in his chest, not quite recognition, but a gentle ache of almost memory. One morning, while arranging day-old pastries in the discount basket, Sage found Luna beside him on the floor behind the counter, her 3-year-old face serious with important information. "I saw us in the place where you make sandwiches differently," she announced, her small hands cupped as if holding something precious. "You cut them like triangles there, and you put little notes inside like secrets, and when people eat them, they remember happy things." Something in her expression, the careful way she held her hands as if still carrying that invisible gift, made Sage reach for his lunch sandwich and cut it diagonally instead of straight across. Acting on an impulse he couldn't explain, he tore a small piece of paper from his school notebook and wrote, "You are exactly where you need to be today." He tucked the note between the bread and cheese, wrapped it carefully and offered it to Luna. She unwrapped it with the reverence of someone opening a treasure, found the note, and even though she couldn't read the words yet, she pressed it against her chest and smiled with such pure delight that Sage understood he had stumbled onto something important. Maybe the television wasn't showing Luna random images, but possibilities that existed alongside, their own life like gentle shadows cast by a kinder sun. There, parents watched this quiet collaboration with the amazement of people discovering that mystery could wear the comfortable clothes of daily love. Eleanor began asking Luna about the different kitchens she glimpsed, learning to trust her daughter's intuition about which recipes wanted to be tried. Their father started leaving small surprises around the bakery based on Luna's descriptions of places where people leave gifts for each other just because the day is beautiful. Each evening, Luna would sit with the television before sleep, turning the dial with increasing confidence, listening to what she had begun to think of as the sound of all possible worlds breathing together. The static wasn't emptiness, it was the gentle conversation between infinite versions of love, the cosmic lullaby that connected every tender moment across every reality that had ever learned how to say home. The bakery grew warmer somehow, more welcoming, as if Luna's glimpses of other possibilities were teaching them all how to be more fully themselves in this one. And in the corner of her room, the television hummed its patient song, waiting for her to discover that the most beautiful frequency of all might be the one where she already lived, surrounded by the scent of rising bread and the sound of her family's laughter echoing softly through rooms filled with ordinary magic. As Luna grew from the age of wonder into the age of understanding, her relationship with the television deepened from curious touching to something that felt more like a gentle conversation with an old friend who spoke in frequencies rather than words. By her 5th birthday, when the candles on her cake flickered in rhythm with the television's soft hum, she had learned what she privately called tuning gently, a way of approaching the dial not with the eager grabbing of wanting something specific, but with the patient openness of someone who trusts that what needs to be found will reveal itself in its own time. She discovered this the way all important lessons arrive, through the quiet wisdom that comes from making small mistakes in a safe place. One afternoon, when restlessness buzzed in her chest like a trapped bee, Luna had tried to force the dial toward a channel she remembered, twisting it with the impatient energy of wanting. The screen responded with harsh static that made her eyes water, a chaotic swirl of color and sound that felt like 100 voices shouting at once, none of them kind. She pulled her hand away, startled not by pain but by the feeling of having asked too loudly in a library that preferred whispers. So she tried something different. Settling cross-legged on the braided rug her grandmother had made, Luna placed her palm against the warm wooden frame and let her breathing slow until it matched the television's subtle pulse. She learned to listen not with her ears but with something deeper, the soft, persistent rhythm of her own heart. When she approached the dial this way, with what felt like an inner curtsy of respect, the screen would soften and show her worlds that seemed to be waiting patiently for her gentle attention. The most remarkable discovery was that the dial responded to emotions rather than intention. When loneliness crept into her chest like morning fog, her touch would find frequencies where connection bloomed in unexpected places. She glimpsed worlds where strangers left encouraging notes in library books, realities where every park bench hummed with the warmth of previous conversations, dimensions where people gathered simply to share stories with anyone who wanted to listen. The loneliness wouldn't disappear, but it would transform into something softer, more bearable, as if seeing these other possibilities reminded her that isolation was always temporary. Curiosity led her to channels of gentle discovery, places where children learned by tracing glowing letters in sand, worlds where questions asked with sincere wonder were answered by the universe itself through beautiful coincidences. These glimpses filled Luna with a quiet excitement that felt like Christmas morning stretched into an entire way of being, teaching her that learning could feel like breathing rather than reaching. But love, Luna learned, always led to the same extraordinary frequency. No matter how she approached the dial when her heart was full of affection for her family, she would find herself tuning into what she began to think of as the harmony channel. Here, every possible version of her family existed in gentle cooperation, the reality where her father became a traveling storyteller but still baked bread for every town he visited, the dimension where Elena opened a school that taught children to cook with love as the primary ingredient, the world where Sage grew up to write books that helped people find their way home to themselves. On this frequency, she could see that love wasn't different across realities. It was the same golden thread woven through infinite variations, connecting every version of caring that had ever existed. Sometimes she would spend entire afternoons on this channel, watching her family love each other in countless different ways, learning that while the shape of devotion might change, its essence remained constant as starlight. One evening, as autumn painted the windows with early darkness, Luna found Sage reading at the kitchen table and climbed into his lap without invitation. "I want to show you something," she said. But instead of leading him to the television, she pressed her small hand against his chest, right over his heart. "Close your eyes and feel the warm place." Sage closed his eyes and felt Luna's breathing slow beside him, felt her small body relax into complete trust. And for just a moment, he caught the faintest echo of what she experienced. Not an image, but a feeling, warm and golden and infinitely safe, as if every act of love that had ever existed was humming quietly in the space between his heartbeats. "That's the channel where we always find each other," Luna whispered. And Sage understood that his sister wasn't just watching other realities. She was learning to recognize the frequencies of love that connected all worlds, including the one where they sat together in their parents' kitchen, surrounded by the gentle certainty of bread rising in the darkness, ready to feed anyone who needed the simple comfort of something made with care. The television hummed its patient song in the corner, and Luna knew that the static between channels wasn't emptiness. It was the breathing space where all possibilities held hands, the cosmic lullaby that reminded her that every world, including her own, was held in the same tender embrace of infinite love. That gentle moment of shared understanding between Luna and Sage became the seed of something neither of them had words for yet, a quiet partnership that grew with the same patient certainty as bread rising in a warm kitchen. Sage couldn't see the channels Luna described, but he learned to read the subtle changes in her expression, with the careful attention of someone translating a beloved language he was still learning to speak. When her eyes went soft and distant, holding that particular shimmer of light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond their small room, he knew she was visiting frequencies where love expressed itself in ways that made ordinary moments feel like gentle celebrations. The breakthrough came on a morning when Luna woke from troubled dreams, her small face creased with the kind of worry that sits heavy in a child's chest. She had found herself on a channel where all the rooms were empty, where the scent of home lingered, but no voices filled the spaces, no warmth of bodies that belonged to her heart. She found Sage in the kitchen, already measuring flour for the morning's rolls, his movements carrying the steady rhythm of someone who had learned to find peace in necessary tasks. Without speaking, Luna settled herself at his feet, wrapping her arms around his legs, as if anchoring herself to something solid and real. Sage felt the tremor in her small body, the way she pressed her face against his knees, as if trying to absorb his presence through her skin. Something in her desperate grip made him pause, made him reach for the gentleness that lived in the space between words. "Bad dreams?" he asked softly, continuing to work the dough with one hand, while the other rested on Luna's head, fingers threading through her sleep-mussed curls. She nodded against his leg, and after a moment whispered, "I went to a sad channel. Everyone was gone and I couldn't find the way back." The fear in her voice settled in Sage's chest like a cold stone. He set down his measuring cup and knelt beside her, gathering her into his arms with careful tenderness. "You know what I think? I think maybe you need an anchor, something to help you remember the way home." He carried her to the counter and began assembling ingredients with purposeful movements that felt larger than himself. Luna watched as Sage selected bread still warm from yesterday's final batch, spreading it with butter that caught the morning light like small pools of sunshine. He added thin slices of cheese, a whisper of mustard, and something else, a careful attention that transformed the simple act of sandwich making into something that felt like a prayer. When he cut the sandwich diagonally, creating two perfect triangles, Luna felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that went deeper than memory. "This is important," Sage said, tearing a small piece of paper from their mother's notepad. He wrote carefully, his handwriting carrying the deliberate loops of someone who took pride in making letters easily read. "Luna is loved in every dimension. Follow this feeling home." He folded the note into a tiny square and tucked it between the layers of bread and cheese, pressing the sandwich gently together as if sealing a promise. When Luna unwrapped the sandwich and found the note, something magical happened. She could feel the truth of the words settling into her bones, becoming part of her understanding of how the world worked. The fear from her nightmare didn't disappear, but it transformed into something manageable, something that could be held alongside love rather than overwhelming it. From that morning forward, Sage's sandwich signals became their secret language of comfort and connection. He learned to read the tilt of her head, the unfocused pause between sentences, the way her hands sometimes opened and closed as if catching invisible fireflies. He couldn't see what she saw, but he could always catch the shape of what her heart was saying. And once you know the shape, you can build a bridge. Triangles meant homecoming. Rectangles meant steadiness. No crusts when softness was required. Crusts left on when she needed reminding that she was stronger than she thought. A speck of lemon zest meant new paths were safe to explore. A whisper of black pepper meant boundaries could be love wearing a protective coat. The notes became Luna's anchor points. You belong here too. Home is wherever your family remembers your favorite stories. Every world is better because you exist in it. One afternoon when Luna had been quiet for hours, her eyes holding the pale shimmer of a channel that hadn't fully let her go, Sage appeared with honey and butter on toasted bread, cut in gentle triangles. The note tucked inside read simply, "The smell of home is waiting for you." He sat beside her without speaking, just being present, and began to hum a tune their mother sang while baking. Slowly, Luna's gaze sharpened, focusing on the familiar details of her room, and when her eyes finally met his, she smiled with the quiet relief of someone who had found their way back from a very long journey. The television hummed its patient song in the corner, and the bakery grew warmer somehow, as if their gentle ritual was teaching the whole house how to be a better anchor for anyone who needed to remember the frequency of home. The gentle rhythm of sandwich signals and triangular notes had given Luna confidence to explore deeper frequencies, but it was the sound drifting from their neighbor's window on quiet Tuesday nights that taught her she wasn't the only one who understood the language between worlds. Mrs. Chen's radio, usually a soft companion of jazz and evening news, would shift after 10 o'clock into something different, a voice that spoke with the same patient, knowing Luna recognized from her deepest television channels, as if the speaker understood that some conversations required the tenderness of whispered secrets shared in the dark. One evening, when restlessness hummed in her chest like a tuning fork, Luna found her father wrapping still warm rolls in a clean kitchen towel, adding a jar of their mother's strawberry preserves and a small container of butter that caught the lamplight like captured sunshine. "Night shift at the radio station," he explained, noticing her curious expression. "They forget to eat when they're keeping the lonely company." He glanced toward the window where that mysterious voice drifted through the evening air. "Want to come along, little moon? I think there's someone there you might like to meet." The radio station lived in an old brick building that used to store seeds for the whole county, and it still held that patient feeling of things waiting to grow. The stairwell smelled like dust and dried flowers, and a soft red light glowed in the hallway with the gentle persistence of a heartbeat. Through a window marked with fading letters, Luna saw a woman seated at a console that looked like a small city of glowing buttons and silver dials, her hands moving with the practiced grace of someone conducting a quiet orchestra, for an audience she couldn't see but deeply loved. The woman looked up as they entered, her eyes holding the same patient depth Luna recognized in her television's screen during its most peaceful moments. "Ah," she said into the microphone, her voice carrying the warmth of kitchen light spilling onto snow. "Tonight's weather is gentle, and we have visitors bearing gifts." She pressed a button, filling the room with piano music that sounded like rain learning to dance, then removed her headphones and smiled at Luna, with the familiarity of someone recognizing an old friend in a crowded room. "Iris," their father said, setting down the basket of warm bread. "Thought you might need something to keep you company through the quiet hours." "And you've brought me something even more precious," Iris replied, her gaze resting on Luna with gentle recognition. "You feel the currents between stations, don't you, little one?" It wasn't a question that needed proving. It was the kind of understanding that arrives complete, like morning light filling a room all at once. Iris gestured to an empty chair beside the console. "Sit with me while this song plays. I have a feeling we might speak the same language." The control board was a landscape of tiny lights and worn knobs, each one glowing with quiet purpose. She showed Luna a large smooth dial that had been polished to silver by years of careful hands. "This isn't so different from what you know at home. The secret isn't to chase what you want to hear. It's to listen for the frequency that's been waiting patiently for you to find it." Luna settled into the chair and placed her hand on the dial, feeling its warmth pulse gently against her palm. She had learned to match her breathing to the television's rhythm. Now she did the same with the radio's subtle hum. The static between stations softened in her awareness, transforming from harsh noise into something textured and alive, filled with the edges of distant feelings, someone humming to keep from crying, a night worker telling jokes to the darkness, the soft breathing of people who couldn't sleep but didn't feel alone anymore. "Yes," Iris whispered, careful not to break the delicate moment. "Most people hunt through frequencies like they're searching for treasure. You're learning to welcome what wants to be found." When the song ended, Iris spoke into the night again, her voice carrying the comfort of a hand on a worried forehead. To everyone driving the long roads tonight, you're doing exactly what you need to do. To the one sitting by a window counting stars, I see you. We'll play something that breathes with you. She selected a record that sounded like late summer evenings, and Luna felt an ache in her chest that belonged to beautiful things she would understand when she was ready. As they prepared to leave, Iris pressed something small and warm into Luna's palm, a button carved from pale wood that seemed to hold sunlight even in the dim station. When you hold this, remember what you learned tonight. Big wanting makes noise that drowns out the gentle voices. Small asking invites exactly the right door to open. Walking home through streets that felt different now, more connected, Luna understood that Iris had taught her something essential about her gift. The television channels weren't meant for escaping her own world, but for learning to recognize the infinite tenderness that already existed in every moment of her ordinary life. She was learning to watch without yearning, to appreciate other possibilities, without losing love for the beautiful reality where she walked beside her father, carrying bread to people who spent their nights helping others feel less alone. Back in her room, she placed the wooden button on top of the television's frame like a small moon-keeping watch, then settled into her familiar position with new wisdom. She breathed slowly, asked gently, and waited without reaching. The screen softened into a kitchen where a young woman who looked like Iris danced with someone whose laughter seemed to make the whole room bigger, and Luna smiled without needing more. She was learning that witnessing could be its own form of love, and love was the frequency that connected every world she would ever need to find. The wooden button from Iris became Luna's compass as adolescence arrived like a gentle tide, changing the shape of familiar shores without washing away anything essential. At 13, Luna had grown tall enough to reach the highest bakery shelves without stretching, her shadow lengthening across the warm tiles as she moved, with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to inhabit her body like a comfortable home. The television still hummed its patient song in the corner of her room, but their relationship had deepened beyond simple wonder into something that felt more like a conversation with the universe's most understanding teacher, someone who knew exactly which lesson would help her heart make sense of its expanding capacity for feeling. The dial responded differently to her adolescent touch, finding frequencies that hummed with the complex harmonies of becoming. Luna discovered channels she had never encountered before, what she began to think of as the bittersweet frequencies, where joy and melancholy wove together like threads in her grandmother's quilts. Here she glimpsed realities where her grandmother, who had died when Luna was barely walking, still moved through a kitchen filled with golden light, teaching another version of Luna how to braid not just dough, but intentions, weaving wishes for safety and love into patterns that would hold whoever touched them in gentle protection. The ache that filled Luna's chest when she watched these channels wasn't entirely sadness. It was the complex emotion of witnessing love that transcended the boundaries of time and possibility. She understood now that grief wasn't just about missing someone. It was about recognizing that love creates ripples across infinite dimensions, that everyone who had ever been cherished continued to exist somewhere in the vast network of connection that held all realities together like a cosmic web woven from starlight and memory. Sage, now 16 and dusted with flour like a constellation, mapping his dedication, seemed to sense these new depths in his sister's viewing. His sandwich signals evolved with her growing complexity. The notes tucked inside became quieter, more present. Breathe between thoughts, one might say, or let the gentle thing lead, or simply you. Don't have to carry the whole sky. He learned to read the particular shimmer in her eyes that meant she had been visiting the channels where alternate paths bloomed like flowers in an infinite garden, showing her versions of their family where small, forgotten choices had led to vastly different joys. One autumn afternoon, when Luna emerged from a particularly profound session with tears she couldn't quite explain, Sage appeared with toast cut into gentle triangles, spread with butter and honey that caught the late light like captured sunshine. "Bad channel?" he asked softly, settling beside her on the braided rug. Luna shook her head, struggling to find words for what she had witnessed, a frequency where their father had become a traveling musician, his guitar telling stories under starlit skies, where their mother's paintings hung in sun-drenched galleries instead of pastries cooling on wire racks. Not bad, she finally whispered. Just different kinds of beautiful. It makes my chest feel too small for all the feelings. Sage nodded, with the understanding of someone who had learned to translate emotions he couldn't see but deeply felt. He unwrapped his own sandwich and ate quietly beside her, his presence a steady anchor that reminded her that witnessing infinite possibilities was a gift, but choosing to fully love the reality where they sat together was a choice that made every dimension more beautiful. The most profound discovery came during a week when Luna felt caught between childhood and whatever came next, when her emotions seemed to change like weather, and her body felt like a house she was still learning to navigate. She found herself drawn to a frequency she had never encountered before, one that showed only transitions, moments of becoming rather than states of being. Here she witnessed countless versions of growing up, children becoming teenagers in worlds where the passage was celebrated with festivals of understanding, realities where adolescence was guided by communities who remembered what it felt like to have your heart grow faster than your ability to hold, or the feelings it discovered when Mrs. Chen's elderly cat slipped peacefully from the world one soft winter night. Luna carried this new understanding like a lantern to her neighbor's door. She didn't speak of other channels or alternate realities. She simply sat beside the grieving woman with a basket of Sage's poppy seed rolls, spreading honey and butter with the same careful attention her grandmother might have used to braid love into fabric. As Mrs. Chen cried and then smiled, sharing stories of the cat's first uncertain day in her home, Luna heard in her neighbor's voice the same cosmic lullaby the static always sang. Everything changes, and yet everything is held in the infinite tenderness that connects all worlds. These experiences taught Luna that her gift was evolving beyond casual viewing into something that carried responsibility. She was learning to be a bridge between possibilities, someone who could help others recognize that every moment contained infinite potential for beauty, growth, and the kind of love that existed beyond the boundaries of any single reality. The television hummed its patient song, and Luna began to imagine a small space in the back of the bakery where someone could sit quietly, not to escape their own world, but to remember the interdimensional nature of love itself, how every act of kindness rippled across infinite possibilities, how every moment of connection existed simultaneously in all universes where hearts learned to recognize each other. In the quiet moments before sleep, holding Iris's wooden button and feeling the television's gentle pulse, Luna knew she was being prepared for something larger than personal wonder. She was learning that the static between channels wasn't just the sound of all universes breathing together. It was the cosmic lullaby that reminded her that love always finds its way home. No matter which dimension it calls from, no matter how many different forms it learns to wear. The understanding arrived like morning light filling a room, not sudden, but inevitable, warming Luna from the inside until she could no longer contain what felt like a gentle responsibility growing in her chest. Sitting in the back storage room one afternoon, surrounded by flour sacks and the familiar scent of cardamom that clung to everything in their bakery, Luna realized that keeping her gift private felt like hoarding sunshine. The television's wisdom wasn't meant for one person alone. It was meant to flow like water finding its way to anyone who needed the comfort of knowing they belonged somewhere in the infinite network of love that connected all worlds. She found her parents in the kitchen during the quiet hour between lunch and dinner rush, their movements synchronized by years of working together in the gentle rhythm that made their bakery feel like the heart of something larger than itself. Elena was braiding challah dough with the meditative focus she brought to all beautiful tasks, while their father arranged tomorrow's sourdough loaves in their proofing baskets like he was tucking children into bed. "I want to share the television," Luna said simply, settling at the worn wooden table where important family conversations had always unfolded. "Create a quiet space where people can say it if they need to remember that they're not alone in any universe." She watched her parents' faces for the flicker of understanding that would tell her they could sense the shape of what she was trying to build. Elena set down her pastry brush, flour dusting her hands like tiny stars. "What kind of space, little moon?" she asked, and Luna felt grateful for parents who had learned to recognize wisdom wearing unusual clothes. The transformation began that weekend, becoming a family project that felt like preparing for a celebration they couldn't quite name. Sage contributed his carpenter's intuition, building a small shelf that curved like gentle arms and positioning the grandmother's old armchair so it faced the corner where natural light fell softest. Elena painted the walls the color of early morning sky, and their father installed a lamp that could be dimmed to match whatever kind of comfort someone needed. The television found its new home positioned for privacy and peace. With Iris's wooden button resting on top like a small blessing, Luna arranged the space with the same careful attention Sage brought to his sandwich making. Everything chosen for comfort, nothing demanding more attention than it deserved. People began arriving with the tentative hope of those who had learned not to expect miracles but remained open to small wonders. Luna never explained what they might see. She simply offered tea and mentioned that the back room was available for quiet sitting, that sometimes a few minutes of peace could help a person remember their own strength. Mr. Chen, the postal worker whose shoulders always seemed weighted with weather, was among the first to try the space. He settled into the armchair with the careful movements of someone who rarely allowed himself rest, and Luna left him alone with whatever he needed to find. When he emerged 20 minutes later, his eyes held the soft focus of someone who had been reminded of something important. He pressed a smooth riverstone into Luna's palm. "For the windowsill," he murmured, and she understood that he had found a frequency where the burden of carrying other people's important news felt less heavy. Mrs. Patterson's daughter, visiting to settle her mother's affairs, spent an entire afternoon in the space and left with tears that looked like relief. "I felt her presence," she whispered to Luna. "Not clearly, but I knew she was okay, still creating beautiful things." Somewhere in the light, she left a small sewing thimble on the shelf beside Mr. Chen's stone. Young mother, juggling 3 children and 2 jobs, discovered the space during a particularly overwhelming week. She emerged with shoulders that seemed less burdened, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had been reminded that every story, including her own, was being held in an infinite embrace of possibilities. Her offering was a child's drawing of a house with too many windows, each one glowing with warm yellow light. Luna learned that her role was less about showing people specific channels and more about creating conditions where they could find their own frequency of comfort. The television seemed to understand its new purpose, its hum growing softer and more welcoming, as if it had been waiting its entire existence to serve as a bridge between the healing someone needed and the love that was always available, waiting to be tuned into with sufficient gentleness. The shelf became a windowsill of small offerings, buttons, ribbons, notes folded as precisely as prayers, each one representing a moment when someone had been reminded that they belonged somewhere in the vast network of connection that held all realities together. The bakery grew warmer somehow, more alive, as if the act of offering sanctuary had taught the whole building how to hold people with greater tenderness. In the quiet moments before closing, Luna would sit in the space and feel the day's accumulated gratitude settling around her like a soft blanket. She was learning that the static between channels wasn't just the sound of all universes breathing together. It was the gentle hum of shared humanity, the cosmic lullaby that reminded everyone who entered that they were loved, they were safe, and they were exactly where they needed to be. The rain outside tapped a patient rhythm against the bakery's windows. The afternoon river first arrived, a grey hush that made the world inside seem warmer, more luminous. Luna noticed them before she understood why. A slender figure, hair pulled back with a pencil, a smudge of blue paint streaking their wrist. They moved with the careful grace of someone who saw more than what was visible, the kind of quiet presence that turns a room just slightly toward hope. River paused by the offering shelf in the sanctuary, leaving a tiny paper boat among the river stones and folded notes. It was stained blue, its edges softened by careful hands, and it seemed to carry the memory of distant currents. Luna watched from behind the counter as River found the window seat, sketchbook balanced on drawn-up knees, capturing not the objects around them, but the way light softened as it touched cooling pastries. When their eyes met, Luna felt a recognition as gentle as a familiar song heard from far away, as if between them there were a language neither had to learn, only remember. River's smile was tender, careful not to startle, as if it had learned the value of patience. When Luna brought tea to the table, River's fingers curled around the cup, soaking in its warmth. I listen to the midnight radio sometimes, River said, voice as soft as the rain. I heard about this place from a letter someone read on air. No names, just that there was a room where the quiet knew how to hold people. Luna thought of Iris, and the way kindness could travel without signatures, and she nodded, offering River the silent invitation to try the sanctuary if they wished. River's first visit to the back room felt less like entering a new place and more like returning to one they'd forgotten. They settled into the armchair, hands resting on their sketchbook, eyes drifting to the television's gentle glow. Later, River would describe what they experienced, not visions or stories, but colors moving with intention. Hush blue before the first snow, gold that smelled of toast and clean sheets, violet that ached with the promise of something whole. When they emerged, they set the paper boat on the shelf, touching it as if anchoring a promise. I didn't find an answer, River murmured, voice reverent. Just a place in me I forgot was still whole. From then on, River became part of the bakery's quiet weather, arriving in the soft pause after the morning rush, sketchbook in hand. Their art was never about likeness, but about feeling. Watercolor golds for hopeful remembering, silver for moments of quiet understanding, deep blue for the hush that settles between friends. They drew the warmth in Sage's steady hand as he passed a plate, the way Eleanor's spoon tapped a bowl in time with her humming, the glow in children's eyes as they pressed noses to the glass. If Luna was the tuner, River was the translator, finding on paper the emotional harmonies she found in the static between worlds. Sage approved in his quiet way, slicing an extra sandwich for River each morning, always cut diagonally, a folded note tucked inside with messages like, "Today is gentle enough," or "Pause here." River would taste the first bite, smile as if savoring a color, and slip the note into their sketchbook like a pressed leaf. On a whim, Sage built a low bench to fit beside the armchair, sanding it smooth and setting it in place with a simple explanation. For two. No one needed more. In the afternoons, Luna and River would sometimes sit together in the sanctuary, their presence a gentle conversation that didn't require words. River didn't ask about the television. Luna didn't narrate. They simply let their breathing find a shared pace, fingers resting atop the dial as if holding a small animal willing to be held. The static would soften, opening into a sound like a meadow in evening, wind in tall grass, the tick of insects, water finding stones. River's paint-smudged hand found Luna's, not to guide but to say, "I'm here," and together they let the silence stretch. Generous and kind, River spoke over tea and rainy light, of painting feelings that defied naming, doors made of light, people crossing thresholds and looking back as if to say, "I knew you would be there." Luna recognized in their voice the ache of unspoken longing, the way hope sometimes sounds like an almost letter you hide, for fear of tearing something tender. She did not press. They were learning together that readiness cannot be rushed, that some doors open only for those who wait. As days passed, River's paintings began to fill the sanctuary's walls, abstract swells of color that echoed the frequencies Luna described. Visitors who came to sit with the television found themselves drawn to these windows of feeling, pausing before each canvas as if listening for a memory. The sanctuary became a tapestry of healing. Some came to watch, some to see, some only to sit quietly and let the gentle weather of belonging remind them they were not alone. The night the next frequency arrived, Luna and River sat side by side, Sage sliding a plate of toast toward them as the radio murmured kind weather. Luna felt the subtle tug of something delicate in the static, and when she turned the dial, the television didn't show places but arrivals. Porch lights flickering on, backpacks dropped on welcome rugs, hands smoothing cardigans over tired shoulders. No faces, only gestures of return, the grammar of coming home. River's hand tightened on Luna's in silent gratitude. "I think I've been hoping for this without knowing I was hoping," they whispered, eyes shining with the tenderness of recognition. They sat long after the bakery cooled, and the paper stars on the ceiling gathered what light the day had left. When Luna finally clicked the television off, the room felt newly open, as if a door had been left ajar for the morning. River pressed a paint blue thumbprint to Luna's wrist, a small crescent moon to mark the moment. "Tomorrow," River promised, not as a plan but as a gentle assurance. The static hummed its lullaby, and Luna felt the world shift gently, as if every universe were drawing its circle a little closer around them, reminding them both, "Come back, come back. Come back." Morning opened like a door that had been waiting to be noticed, and Luna woke with River's blue thumbprint crescent still bright on her wrist, a soft reminder that some promises are simply a way of naming the direction the heart already leans. The bakery was quiet in that golden hour before the city remembered itself, steam ghosting from cups, ovens exhaling warmth, Sage humming scraps of songs he didn't realize he'd learned from their father. River arrived with rain on their shoulders and a sketchbook under one arm, the paper boat on the offering shelf catching, the new light as if it had sailed all night to be here for this moment of quiet discovery. The reunion frequency had become Luna's secret. Sanctuary within the sanctuary, a channel she returned to whenever the weight of witnessing infinite possibilities grew too heavy for one heart to carry alone. Here every goodbye contained the seed of its own return. Every separation revealed itself as temporary pause in love's patient conversation with itself. She witnessed moments that existed outside time's linear march, train platforms patterned with small reunions, shy and certain. A bus hissing at the curb as someone stepped off into arms that had been counting days. The gentle choreography of recognition that said, "I'm here and you made it and we're okay." When they settled in the sanctuary that morning, the television felt attentive, like something pricking its ears at the sound of a familiar car turning onto the street. Luna placed Iris's wooden button on her palm, laid the other hand on the dial and breathed, until the static softened to something like distant footsteps and the sound a house makes when a key turns home. River made slow marks in their sketchbook, not sketching images but tracing movements, a fingertip pressed to a doorframe, a shoe paused on the last stair, a hand hovering an extra second at a shoulder blade, as if confirming the map of someone remembered by touch. The sanctuary learned this new weather quickly. A delivery driver with flour on his sleeves sat in the armchair and kept his cap in his hands, turning it slowly like a dial. When he emerged, he placed a tarnished key on the offering shelf and cleared his throat. "My brother and I haven't spoken in years," he said to the room more than to anyone specific. "Saw a porch with our mother's ugly flower pots. Felt the way the door used to stick." He nodded once, as if agreeing with something kind he'd been told, and left with sourdough tucked under his arm. A young woman came seeking what she couldn't name, her eyes holding the particular grief of lost things that carry more weight than their physical form. She had lost a precious family heirloom, a small locket passed down through generations. Luna gently guided her to the sanctuary, offering the quiet space without explanation. Later, the woman emerged weeping softly, not with despair but with profound relief. "I saw it being worn by someone who looked like my great-grandmother," and she smiled and the locket glowed. "I know it's not lost forever. It's just somewhere else for now." She left a single silver teardrop earring on the shelf, a quiet offering of gratitude. The most profound moment came when Luna found herself drawn to the frequency with unusual urgency. The television screen softened into a scene that made her breath catch, a kitchen filled with golden light where a woman who looked remarkably like Iris sat at a small table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, smiling at someone just beyond the frame. The woman's eyes held the same patient depth Luna remembered, but her face was younger, unlined by the years that had taught her to guide lonely voices through darkness. Another figure entered the scene, a man whose presence seemed to make the very air shimmer with joy. He moved with the easy grace of someone who belonged completely in this moment, settling beside the woman with comfortable familiarity of 1,000 mornings shared. When he reached across the table to touch her hand, Luna understood she was witnessing something sacred. Iris as she had been, dancing with the love that had shaped her into the gentle guide Luna had been blessed to know. When the scene faded, Luna sat in gentle silence, feeling as though she'd been entrusted with a gift too precious for words. River found her there, still holding the remote with reverent hands, her face glowing with the particular light that comes from witnessing something that changes the shape of what you thought possible. "You saw something beautiful," River observed, settling beside her with intuitive grace that had become their shared language. "I saw Iris dancing," Luna whispered, and somehow River understood that this wasn't about past or future, but about the eternal present, where all love exists simultaneously, where every reunion that ever was or would be was happening in the same cosmic moment, connected by golden thread of recognition, that helps hearts remember they were never truly separate. That evening, Sage appeared with toast cut into perfect circles, a note tucked inside that read, "Everything comes back. Even hope." The television hummed its patient song, and Luna knew that somewhere in the static between channels, every goodbye was finding its way back to hello. Every separation discovering it had always been an illusion, and every heart that had ever learned to love was dancing in the endless reunion that connects all worlds, where tenderness learns to recognize itself and whispers, "Welcome home." The awareness arrived like winter's first breath, not harsh but undeniable, settling into Luna's understanding with the gentle weight of something that had been approaching longer than she realized. 3 evenings had passed without Iris's familiar voice, weaving through the midnight hours. The radio station playing recorded music that felt hollow without the warm presence that usually filled the spaces between songs. When Mr. Chen stopped by the bakery with shoulders that carried more than his usual postal burden, Luna knew before he spoke that the woman who had taught her to listen for frequencies of the heart was preparing for her own journey between channels. "She's resting at home now," Mr. Chen said softly, accepting the cup of tea Elena offered with hands that trembled slightly. "Says she needs to tune into her own static for a while, learn what it's been trying to tell her." He left a small envelope on the counter, Iris's handwriting spelling Luna's name in letters that wavered like radio signals from very far away. The note inside was brief. "Little moon, when you're ready, come sit with me. I have one more frequency to find, and I think you're the only one who can help me tune the dial." Luna found Iris in her small apartment above the florist shop, where the air held the scent of dried lavender and old books, creating an atmosphere that felt like memory made tangible. Iris lay propped against pillows that looked like gentle clouds, her skin delicate as fine parchment, but her eyes still holding that familiar depth of someone who had spent years listening to the spaces between words. When she saw Luna, she smiled with the crinkled warmth that seemed to reach across all possible distances. "You came," Iris whispered, her voice carrying the soft rustle of autumn leaves. "I knew you would. You understand the language of almost goodbye, don't you?" Luna settled in the chair beside the bed, and Iris reached for her hand with fingers that felt like paper, worn smooth by decades of gentle handling. "The static is getting different for me now," Iris continued, her gaze drifting toward the window where afternoon light was beginning to fade. "Not harsh like when I was young and afraid. Now it sounds like a choir singing a song I almost remember." From her pocket, Iris drew a small silver object, a fader cap from the radio console, polished smooth by years of careful adjustment. "This is for you," she said, placing it in Luna's palm beside the wooden button she always carried. "When you hold this, remember what I taught you about volume. It's always a conversation, never a command." Luna felt the weight of both objects in her hand, understanding that they belonged together, like complementary frequencies. "How you've learned to help people find the channels they need," Iris continued, her breathing shallow but steady. "Now I need your gift to help me find mine. The one where letting go feels like coming home rather than leaving." The understanding settled in Luna's chest like a warm stone. She had spent years learning to tune into channels of comfort and possibility. But this was different. This was about helping someone find the frequency where transition revealed itself not as ending, but as another kind of doorway. Another way for love to change form without diminishing. "Tell me what you need to see," Luna whispered, and Iris closed her eyes with the relief of someone who had been waiting a long time to be understood. "I need to know he's still dancing," Iris said. And Luna knew she meant the man from the golden kitchen, the love that had shaped Iris into the gentle guide she had become. "I need to see the place where every goodbye becomes a different kind of hello." Luna placed her free hand on Iris's forehead, feeling the warmth there like a small sun preparing to set. She didn't need the television screen for this. The frequency Iris needed existed in the space between heartbeats, in the static that connects all realities where love learns to recognize itself. Luna breathed slowly, tuning not with her eyes but with the deeper understanding Iris had taught her, listening for the channel where separation reveals itself as temporary pause in love's eternal conversation, the room filled with something that wasn't quite light and wasn't quite sound, a presence that felt like morning breaking over water. Luna saw, felt, understood, a dance floor made of starlight where Iris moved in arms that made the whole universe seem to expand with gentle laughter. Here, letting go wasn't loss but transformation, wasn't ending, but the deepest hello love had ever learned to speak. Iris's breathing grew softer, her face relaxing into the expression of someone who had found exactly what she had been searching for. "Yes," she whispered, wonder filling her voice. "There he is, still waiting for the next dance." Her grip on Luna's hand tightened briefly, then relaxed completely. "Thank you, little moon, for helping me remember that love doesn't end. It just learns new ways to be beautiful." When Iris slipped from one frequency to another, it felt less like departure and more like perfect tuning, as if she had found her ideal channel and settled there with the satisfied sigh of someone finally, completely home. Luna sat in the quiet that followed, holding both the wooden button and the silver cap, feeling the profound peace that comes from witnessing love's ultimate act of trust, the willingness to change form without losing essence. Walking home through streets that felt more transparent now, Luna understood that grief was just another kind of tuning, learning to find the frequency where love continues even when its familiar form has changed. The television hummed its patient song when she returned, and Luna placed both gifts on its frame like small moons keeping each other company. Knowing that somewhere in the static between all channels, Iris was still conducting her quiet orchestra, still helping hearts remember they were never truly alone. The morning after Iris found her perfect frequency, grief settled into the bakery like a gentle rearrangement of light, not dimming anything, but teaching every corner how to hold tenderness with greater intention. Luna woke to find that the wooden button and silver fader cap on the television's frame had somehow taught the entire space a new language of comfort, one that spoke in the soft hum of rising dough and the patient way steam curled from cups of tea, left to cool at exactly the right pace for someone who needed time to breathe. The sanctuary absorbed this transformation like earth receiving rain it had been waiting for without knowing. Luna found herself moving through the space with different awareness, understanding that Iris's final lesson had been about more than helping one person find their last channel. It had been about recognizing that healing was always a collaboration between the comfort someone needed and the infinite reservoir of love that existed. In the spaces between all realities, she rearranged the armchair and River's bench so visitors could sit side by side without feeling observed, added a small table where tea could steam quietly beside a plate of bread that waited under Elena's softest cloth. Sage felt the change in his hands before he understood it with his mind. His morning bread began taking new shapes, loaves braided into gentle waves that caught light like small rivers, rolls formed into constellations that seemed to hold stories about finding your way home. "For ease," he said, tapping one lightly with his knuckle, and Luna could feel in the crust a frequency of steadying that carried itself into every crumb. His sandwich signals evolved into something larger, notes tucked into triangular comfort that read like gentle invitations. "The back room is open if you need a moment to remember who you are." River painted through these afternoon transformations, their canvases turning the sanctuary walls into a gallery of tender atmospheres, napsoft grays, candlelight gold, the deep blue of becoming night. Visitors would pause before these paintings and let their shoulders drop, as if a soft hand had smoothed worry away from places they didn't know they were carrying it. River never explained their work. They offered brushstrokes like open doors, trusting that the right colors would find the right hearts at exactly the right moment. The first visitor after Iris's passing was a young woman with paint under her fingernails and the careful posture of someone learning to navigate a world where loss had rearranged all the familiar landmarks. Luna guided her to the sanctuary with the same gentle invitation Iris had extended that first night at the radio station. No explanations, just the offer of space and the quiet confidence that whatever needed to be found would reveal itself in its own time. When she emerged an hour later, her eyes held the soft focus of someone who had been reminded of something essential. "I saw my grandmother's hands," she whispered, "but they were young again, kneading bread in a kitchen filled with golden light." She looked up and smiled, and I knew she was proud of the person I'm becoming, even when I can't see it. Myself, word spread through the community with the gentle, persistence of warmth moving through a cold house, not as advertisement but as the kind of quiet, knowing that passes between people who recognize healing when they encounter it. A teacher struggling with burnout found channels where education happened in gardens, where learning grew like flowers and students' curiosity was tended with the same care given to seedlings. A father grieving his son discovered frequencies where love continued in forms beyond physical presence, where every act of kindness rippled across dimensions, carrying the essence of those who had taught us how to care. Luna learned to read the particular quality of need each visitor carried, understanding that her role was not to show them specific channels, but to create conditions where they could find their own frequency of comfort. The television seemed to understand this evolution in its purpose, its screen responding with increasing sensitivity to the emotional weather of whoever sat in the armchair, offering exactly the glimpse of possibility that would remind them they were held in something larger than their current circumstances. On quiet evenings, when the last visitor had left and the bakery settled into its familiar rhythm of cooling ovens and satisfied silence, Luna would sit in the sanctuary and feel the accumulated gratitude of the day settling around her like a soft blanket. The wooden button and silver cap caught the last light, and she understood that the static between channels wasn't just the sound of all universes breathing together. It was the gentle hum of shared humanity, the cosmic lullaby that reminded everyone who entered they were loved, they were safe, and they were exactly where they needed to be. One afternoon, while Luna was smoothing the cloth over the bread plate and feeling the profound peace that comes from understanding your purpose as something you become rather than achieve, she heard it, a sound like when a seashell sings, drifting through the bakery's front door. She looked up to see a child standing on the threshold, not quite inside, not quite out, eyes following the television's quiet glow with the same patient attention Luna remembered from her own beginnings. The child's hands were tucked into sleeves too long for them, and their gaze held that rare stillness of someone listening for frequencies that existed between heartbeats. Mrs. Patterson returned during a week when Autumn was teaching the windows how to frame golden light, drawn by something she couldn't name but trusted enough to follow. She settled into the armchair, while Echo sat cross-legged on the braided rug, both breathing in the rhythm Luna had taught them, while River painted quiet strokes that seemed to catch emotions before they reached the canvas. "I keep dreaming about colors that feel like being held," Mrs. Patterson confessed, her voice carrying the tentative hope of someone learning to trust mystery again. Echo tilted their head, with the serious attention they brought to all important discoveries. "Those are the in-between colors," they announced with matter-of-fact wisdom. "They live where the sad and happy meet and decide to be friends." River's brush responded immediately, creating a wash that seemed to breathe with its own gentle life. Not quite blue, not quite gold, but the place where both learned to dance together in perfect understanding. When Mrs. Patterson prepared to leave, she pressed a small watercolor set into River's hands, brushes worn smooth by decades of careful use, paints that had learned the patience of someone who painted feelings rather than objects. "These belong to my daughter," she said quietly. "I think they remember how to make beautiful things, and I think you could help them remember even better." River accepted the gift with the reverence of someone receiving a sacred trust. Understanding that art was always a conversation between what was and what could be, the sanctuary evolved into something that felt less like a room and more like a living poem written in 3 languages: Luna's frequencies of possibility, Echo's vocabulary of gentle recognition, and River's visual translations of the emotions that lived in the spaces between worlds. Visitors would enter seeking one kind of healing and discover something larger, connection to the vast network of tenderness that held all realities, together like a cosmic web woven from starlight and shared understanding. In the quiet moments before closing, when the last visitor had found what they needed, and the bakery settled into its familiar rhythm of cooling ovens and satisfied silence, Luna would look at River's canvases and feel the profound peace that comes from understanding your purpose as something you become rather than achieve. The wooden button and silver fader cap caught the last light on the television's frame, and she knew that somewhere in the static between all channels, every act of witnessed beauty was creating ripples across infinite dimensions, reminding every heart that love was the frequency that made every world worth finding. every moment worth painting, every silence worth sharing in the gentle embrace of understanding that connects all souls who have ever learned how to say, home. The understanding arrived like morning light, finding its way through familiar curtains, not sudden but inevitable, filling Luna with the warm recognition that comes when you finally see the shape of something you've been moving toward your entire life without knowing its destination. The shift began on an ordinary Tuesday, when Autumn was teaching the bakery windows how to frame golden light differently. And Luna realized she had spent the entire morning watching River paint emotional frequencies, while Echo practiced gentle asking, without once feeling the familiar pull toward the television's patient glow. The catalyst came unexpectedly, as all profound lessons do, wrapped in the humble clothes of a neighborhood power outage. The lights blinked once, twice, then settled into darkness with the polite resignation of something that knew its absence would teach more than its presence. The television screen went dark without complaint. The radio hushed to confused silence, and the ovens paused mid-breath like singers between verses. Echo stood in the sanctuary doorway with their backpack still crooked on one shoulder, ready to practice their daily communion with the static between worlds, and found instead the gentle invitation of ordinary silence. "We can still listen," Luna said, and the words surprised her with their certainty. They moved through the morning like a slow tide of discovery, finding that healing didn't require the television's mediation. It lived in the spaces between their shared breathing, in Sage's intuitive appearance with triangular sandwiches and notes that read, "The room remembers how to hold you," in River's decision to set aside their brushes and simply witness the way natural light painted emotions across everyone's faces without needing translation. Visitors arrived throughout the day, drawn by something they couldn't name but trusted enough to follow. A nurse still carrying the antiseptic scent of careful tending sat in the armchair and spoke about the sound heart monitors make in the deep hours of night, not beeping, but breathing with the patients they watched over. A teacher brought homework to grade, but instead found herself describing the way children's curiosity bloomed like flowers when given enough gentle attention. An elderly man with sawdust on his sleeves cupped his coffee as if learning to hold warmth again, sharing stories about building birdhouses that somehow always knew which direction was home. When the electricity returned hours later, it felt almost too bright, too insistent. The television blinked awake with its familiar underwater shimmer, and Luna reached for the remote that lived between Iris's wooden button and the silver fader cap, only to find empty space where it had always waited. She didn't panic. Some part of her had been expecting this lesson. They searched with the thoroughness of people who understood that important things sometimes needed to be lost before they could be truly found. Sage checked the proofing baskets where important objects sometimes nestled among rising loaves. River lifted canvases with the careful attention of someone who knew that missing things often hid in the shadows of beautiful objects. Echo, with the serious dedication they brought to all heartwork, pressed their ear to the television's frame and announced with matter-of-fact wisdom, "It went for a walk, but not far." Luna laughed then, the kind of sound that releases knots you didn't know you were carrying. Understanding that even the remote needed time to discover its own purpose. They lived 3 days without it, and the sanctuary didn't diminish. If anything, it grew more luminous, like a room where someone had just cleaned the windows with careful attention. Luna began to notice what she had been too busy channel surfing to see. The way Sage's morning ritual of measuring flour was itself a meditation on the countless realities, where nourishment was offered with the same reverent care. The way River's quiet presence while painting revealed the living translation of love across different languages. The way Echo's breathing matched the bakery's own rhythm, as if the child had always been part of its essential song. On the third evening, Echo arrived with rain on their shoulders and a secret setting their walk to a quiet beat. They went directly to the sanctuary, slipped between armchair and bench, and emerged with the remote cradled in their palms, wrapped in one of Elena's butter-stained napkins and tied with bakery string. Under the string, someone had tucked a small square of paper. Echo handed it to Luna with the ceremony of a crown returning to its rightful keeper. The note, in Sage's careful handwriting, read simply, "Already tuned." He appeared in the doorway, sheepish and proud. Found it the first night. It felt right to let it rest until we remembered how to hear. Luna held the remote, like she was weighing a small warm heart. When she clicked it on and raised her gaze to the screen, the television didn't offer distant worlds or familiar reunions. It showed the bakery itself, but with a tenderness that made everything inside it look returned to its truest nature. Steam lifted from cups like visible prayers. River's paintings breathed with their own gentle pulse, and in the soft light, she could see the interdimensional nature of ordinary love, how every act of kindness in this room rippled across infinite possibilities, how every moment of connection existed simultaneously in all universes where hearts learned to recognize each other. The television hummed its patient song, and Luna understood that the static between channels had always been the sound of her own world breathing, the cosmic lullaby that reminded her that love was the frequency that made every dimension worth finding, every moment worth cherishing, every silence worth sharing in the gentle embrace of exactly where she belonged. Time moved through the bakery like a gentle tide, each season bringing its own quiet revelations, and Luna found herself growing into the understanding that the years weren't passing but layering. Like the delicate pastries Elena still shaped with hands that had learned patience from decades of working with things that couldn't be rushed. Silver threads caught in River's hair made them look like someone who had been touched by starlight, and their paintings now covered galleries throughout the city, each canvas carrying the emotional frequencies Luna had taught them to recognize, translated into visual languages that helped strangers remember they weren't alone in any universe. Echo, now tall enough to reach the highest bakery shelves without stretching, had developed their own relationship with the television that went beyond Luna's gentle guidance. They could find frequencies Luna had never discovered, channels where music existed as color, where mathematics bloomed like flowers, where every question asked with sincere wonder was answered by the universe itself through beautiful coincidences. The child who had once needed anchoring sandwiches now helped others find their own steady ground, their voice carrying the same patient, knowing Iris had once offered to late-night listeners who needed reminding that dawn always followed the darkest hours. Sage's bread had become legendary throughout the neighborhood, not for technical perfection, but for the way it seemed to carry healing in its crust, comfort in its crumb. His loaves took new shapes, waves that caught light like small rivers, rolls formed into constellations that seemed to hold stories about finding your way home. People came seeking his triangular sandwiches during difficult times, knowing they would find tucked inside not just food, but small paper prayers that read like gentle invitations. You are braver than your fear, and the world is better because you stayed. The sanctuary had grown beyond the back room to encompass the entire bakery, as if the building itself had learned to hold people with greater tenderness. The offering shelf now held treasures from around the world, shells from distant beaches, stones worn smooth by rivers that sang different songs, photographs of grandchildren, keys to homes that lived only in memory. Each object represented a moment when someone had been reminded that they belonged somewhere in the vast network of connection that held all realities together. On quiet evenings, Luna would sit in the sanctuary with River and Echo, the three of them breathing in the rhythm that connected all worlds, while the television hummed its patient song. But increasingly, Luna found herself drawn not to distant channels, but to the frequency that showed their own reality with such tenderness that everything inside it looked returned to its truest nature. Steam lifted from cups like visible prayers. River's paintings breathed with their own gentle pulse, and in the soft light, she could see the interdimensional nature of ordinary love, how every act of kindness in this room rippled across infinite possibilities. The profound realization arrived like morning light filling a familiar room, not sudden but inevitable. Luna understood that she had never been watching other dimensions at all. She had been learning to see the interdimensional nature of love itself, how every moment of connection existed simultaneously in all universes where hearts learned to recognize each other. The television hadn't been showing her different worlds. It had been teaching her to recognize the countless layers of beauty that already existed in the world where she had always belonged. We're all tuned to the same frequency, she whispered to River and Echo as they sat together in the gathering dusk. Every universe, every possibility, every moment where someone chooses tenderness over fear. It's all the same channel, just played at different volumes. The wooden button and silver fader cap caught the last light on the television's frame, creating small pools of warmth that seemed to pulse with their own gentle life. Echo pressed their ear to the television's frame one last time and announced with the matter-of-fact poetry that had never left them, "It's singing the song that helps everyone remember they belong somewhere." River painted this moment without looking at their canvas, their brush moving with the instinctive grace of someone translating love between languages that had finally learned to speak as one. When the last customer had carried away their daily bread and the bakery settled into its familiar rhythm of cooling ovens and satisfied silence, Luna reached for the remote one final time. It rested in her palm like a small warm heart, no longer an instrument of exploration, but a symbol of journey completed. She turned the dial not to another world, but deeper into this one, where the static finally resolved into the sweetest frequency of all, the sound of being exactly where you belong. The television hummed its eternal song, and Luna smiled, understanding at last that the static between channels wasn't emptiness. It was the breathing space where all possibilities held hands, the gentle conversation between infinite versions of love, the cosmic lullaby that reminded everyone that they were held, they were safe, and they were exactly where they needed to be. Somewhere in that gentle hum, Iris was still dancing in her golden kitchen. Echo's grandmother was still singing lullabies, and every act of kindness was rippling across dimensions like stones thrown into still water, creating circles of love that would expand forever. The bakery breathed around them, warm with the scent of tomorrow's bread already whispering through brick walls, and Luna knew that the most beautiful channel was the one where she sat with River, sharing silence with Echo, surrounded by Sage's gentle presence and the accumulated gratitude of everyone who had ever found comfort in this small sanctuary where the ordinary revealed itself as infinitely sacred. And with that, she stretched into the stars, not by leaving this world, but by finally understanding that she had always been part of their gentle light, always been home in the frequency where love learns to recognize itself and whispers, in every dimension, in every heartbeat, in every breath, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for spending this time with us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay.